Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. Today's review, we're going to be looking at some terms of service. So on the channel, we always take a look at public-facing documentation that pertains to privacy, personal data, and protecting data. So for anybody that's new to my channel, my law firm essentially provides legal advisory to organizations on how to manage the data that they have internally. And what that generally will stream into is using different vendors and suppliers. Every single document that we review on this channel is a public-facing document and a representation by these organizations about what it is that is associated between them and a potential customer, them and a potential consumer. What they're saying is this is what our business does. And essentially in 2026, it's impossible to do any business without processing some type of personal data. The term processing is a very broad terminology in the data protection space, and it effectively covers any operation or set of operations on personal data. Now, every geography is going to define processing very differently. It's your responsibility as the customer to know where you process personal data. If you're processing personal data in the United States, what are the laws that apply to how you process data? If you process personal data in the European Union, what are the laws that apply to how you process personal data? If you've ever watched any news, you've seen that there have been a number of different fines that have been issued by different regulatory bodies on how different organizations globally have been using personal data for sometimes nefarious means, sometimes without adhering to the applicable data protection law. And I feel like because the data protection space is ever evolving, a lot of organizations feel like the laws don't apply to them. Even if you feel like the law doesn't apply to you, it's within your interest to understand or get counsel on whether it does. I think that's valuable. If there's something that I think is going to maybe impact me, I would rather have advisory on whether it does affect me or it doesn't affect me than go in blindly and then find myself in a situation that I don't necessarily want to be in. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Today we're going to be reviewing Factory AI. I'm going to quickly look at the product. Okay, so they have some type of native delegation interface, droids where you code, instant incident resolution. So it sounds like it's some type of technology product for incidents maybe. I can see here that they reference Slack and Teams, so I presume that there's some type of integration. Generally, when I engage any type of client, I always ask them to give me insight into their product. The product influences the legal advice that I give them. Every product and service that processes personal data is going to have different data protection laws that apply to the service. For example, if you're in the United States and you're a healthcare provider, there are certain federal privacy legislation that's going to apply to you. If you're not a healthcare provider and you provide a SaaS solution for incident response, the type of personal data laws that apply to you are going to differ to those of a healthcare provider in the US. So it's product by product, service by service. And that's why the review of these terms and conditions is not something that can be easily reviewed if you don't want it done right. Now, every business is different. I personally understand that a lot of organizations are trying to sell their products, but there's a lot of compliance work that should be done from a data protection standpoint to make sure that your business is able to keep on moving. Let's have a look at this definition. For the purposes of the agreement, customer means the organization that the individual accepting this agreement represents. This tells me that they sell their services to businesses. Now, let me tell you why this implicates privacy. Generally within a business, there's going to be a business that potentially purchases a product, let's say for instant incident resolution. An organization purchases this product and then distributes it to its employees or contract workers. Those contract workers are going to need credentials, access credentials to this platform. Those access credentials generally consist of a username and password. Based on the data protection laws, both of those identifiers constitute personal data. And what does that mean? It means two things. One, there's a responsibility that's being placed on this organization if they receive the username and password. And two, there's a responsibility that's placed on the customer because the customer is ultimately responsible for all its personal data in its capacity as a data controller. I've talked a bit about a data controller in the past. A data controller determines the means and purpose of processing. So the means here is they want to engage with this entity. The purpose is for instant incident resolution. Because the customer determines both of those factors, that means they're ultimately responsible for the personal data that they then provide to this organization. And that's really important because there are responsibilities attached to a customer in their capacity. I want to scroll down and I want us to focus a bit on data. Let's go back to the confidentiality because that's generally where the privacy provisions live. Each party understands that the other party has disclosed or may disclose information relating to disclosing party's business, hereinafter referred to as proprietary information. The receiving party agrees to take the same security precautions to protect such proprietary information that the receiving party takes with its own proprietary information. I am intrigued about what constitutes proprietary information. Generally, let me tell you a question that I would generally ask. For this specific provision, I would be asking what may be proprietary information. This is a very broad description, and I would be asking the supplier what this could entail because they're going to have responsibilities that I think should be represented in the terms of service. Now, the one caveat that I want to add here is sometimes the terms of service don't talk much about privacy because it's covered in other documentation like the master service agreement, the data processing addendum, the order form. There's lots of ways in which businesses are able to reflect their practices when it comes to a customer's personal data that may not always be conveyed on the terms of service. I personally believe that there should always be some reference to personal data on the terms of service irrespective. We can see here that by entering into this agreement and using the service, customer accepts and agrees to be bound by the privacy policies located at this link here. So it seems like they've covered their privacy practices here, but I think there should be additional detail on what it is that's going to happen during the term of the service that impacts privacy, and also putting in place some disclaimers around what it is that is going to be their responsibility and then what is the subsequent responsibility of the customer as it pertains to personal data. These privacy policies generally provide insight into their practice. Now, those may cover the service itself, but generally this privacy policy, from what I've seen and the majority of reviews that I've done on the channel, the privacy policy that's placed on the website covers processing associated with the website. I think one of the things that I'm going to try and do in 2026 is I'm going to discuss scope more, but if you've watched any of my reviews in the past, these privacy policies generally cover website processing. For example, if there are cookies that are being collected in association with the site, if there is an IP address in order for them to identify you and target market you. There's different identifiers associated with website processing that do not necessarily capture the processing associated with the actual service that a business is providing. I'll give you an example, right? The McDonald's privacy policy, for example, may say this privacy policy covers our processing related to the website, and then it will give you insights into their practices for the website. But we know that McDonald's collects information like financial data. If you go in and buy a McDonald's meal in store, we know that there's going to be CCTV surveillance if you go into the store as well. There's lots of different identifiers that are not necessarily always captured in the privacy policy, so businesses need to make those distinctions very clear. Now, this review is not related to the privacy policy. If you want me to review that, leave a comment below. I really hope you enjoyed this particular review, and I'll see you in another one.